Hello, my name is Bill Legend, and tonight I'll be hosting a podcast called Parental Alienation Stories. I plan on having a couple that are from Nova Scotia on tonight so they can share their story, what they've been going through in parental alienation. Now, I'm just going to bring Adam in here right now.
How you doing today?
How's she going?
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Not too bad. Sorry for the delay. This is new to me trying this platform and doing podcasts. So thanks for bearing with me and waiting there to get on for tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's okay, Bill.
So how have you been anyway?
Um, Overall, we're hanging in. Lots going on. So
Okay.
for us, we've been advocating for the last probably 10 months now, more publicly than before, and you know as more people continue to speak out, I believe that there's going to be more of a change. So
Okay, so for people that don't know who I am, my name is Bill Edgett, and I help run a few parental alienation support groups. One of them is Parental Alienation Worldwide Support Group, another is Parental Alienation Canada. I'm also a board member of the Canadian Equal Parenting Council, and I've been very active in trying to bring awareness to parental alienation for the past number of years. And tonight I have another person who is experiencing alienation. His name is Adam Potty. He is from Nova Scotia, and he would like the opportunity to share his story to let others know that uh, we're not alone in what we're going through. And the same thing that I am doing tonight to allow Adam to share his story was done for me years ago, which has led to me being here, taking part in this podcast this evening. So, Adam, let's start off with a little bit of information about yourself, your name, where you're from, how old you are, and we'll go on from there.
yeah, I'm originally from Lordways. My name's Adam Potty. I'm 40 years old. I'm a mature student at NSCC. I'm in my second year, and hopefully, I'm going to be getting into criminal justice so I can again give back to the system or to help people that are in similar situations as I am. I have two beautiful boys from a previous marriage that is 14 and 12 that I have um, been withheld going on to 11 months. I have an amazing partner, a new partner. She's a miracle. And I have a beautiful baby girl with her named Hope Nevaeh. That's 2 years old. So,
Well, that's great. That's amazing. You sound like your life is going pretty good in that aspect. You have a, a partner and a child, and that's wonderful that you have someone to share that experience with. Um, as you mentioned, you have two other boys. So let's go back a little bit and let's start off with prior to your marriage. Let's let's get a little bit of details about how you and your wife may have met and what your life was like prior to marriage.
um, my ex-wife, I met when I was 15. Um, we were high school sweethearts, I guess. We were together for um, 13 years altogether. Um, Prior to understanding this process, I did not realize that I was always in an abusive relationship. My childhood was abusive, and then I followed through until my last relationship. So, um, back to marriage, when I look back now, I see how abusive that it actually was. Um, it ended up me being downstairs on my couch for the last 2.5 years of my marriage, and just being alone. So we separated, and 4 months later, she was still my wife. Um, Started having an affair with my younger brother. That was my business partner. That went on for 2 years. Once that the company ended up have to go bankrupt, uh, she ended up getting rid of my brother, and then my brother ended up telling me that the affair was going on 2 years behind my back, while I thought that we were still working on our marriage. So
I'm so sorry to hear all that you went through. It's 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 not that uncommon. I believe I've shared what happened to me regarding my divorce and my situation, and it's very comparable to yours. Being betrayed by some of the closest people in our lives, and just feeling alone and not having anyone there to help support us through this because we've been isolated.
right.
Um, and I'm sorry you went through that. And how how did you what did you do to try to recover from that? Like that, I know it's very devastating, and I needed help, and I sought
Mhm.
out support groups like this to find other people that might help me get through what I was going through. And
Mhm.
I found so many more people who were going through almost identical situations as me. So,
Mhm.
what did you do? How did you cope with this?
At that time, when I lost the business, I lived in Halifax 17 years. I ended up moving back to Cape Breton. Um, Ended up moving back in with my mother. Um, you know, Ended up having nothing, and just because of work ethic, I just picked myself back up and started back working out west. I had to for 7 months because I lost everything in Halifax, and I hated it because I was coming home every second week. I'd pick up my youngest boy at the time, just on the weekends because my oldest was in school. Uh, Prior to leaving Halifax, I always had my kids week on, week off. We would share the kids every Thursday night, and then I would drop them off at their daycare on a Sunday, and then their mom would pick them up from the daycare. So after the business was gone, I automatically my court agreement was changed. That gave her primary care, which is, when I look at it now, is just a terrible mistake, because the thing is that I didn't understand what the court system was all about. Um, I ended up,
So prior to making that decision to, not contend that in court, you were seeing your children on a regular basis.
yeah, yeah, week on, week off.
So you were seeing them on a regular basis, and there had not been any problems with you having custody or access or spending time with your children after the divorce.
While I
So
had
that was
money,
good. So it was going good, and then what happened to change that? It sounds like it's the decision you made to uh, give primary custody to one parent.
again, just being uneducated or not understanding the law. You hire a lawyer and you leave, and the lawyer says this is what you have to do, and you don't think that you have a fight because you're believing in that system. So for me, it goes back to, I was put in the corner, and I at that time, again, it's like there's a lot of emotions going on, so it's like you're already down on yourself. So it's like you don't believe that that you deserve your children, or that, well, what happened is your fault, or there's so many things that you look back now and you're like, can't believe that you actually even thought like that.
Okay.
So It's
So
when
let me get this straight. After you and your um, wife divorced and separated, you were seeing your children on a regular basis until you went to court and she was awarded primary custody. Is that
no,
a fair statement to say?
no, it was just through a lawyer. We didn't even go to court.
No.
Um,
Okay.
it was just went and signed the papers because that's what I was told that I had to do. And prior to losing my business, I mean, when you look back now, there was other times that I can see that my ex-wife was trying to, to alienate the kids, but they were so young at that time. Again, it's yeah. When you look back, you understand what's going on now for how the degree of how extreme it is now. So
So when did you stop seeing your children on a regular basis? What led to that happening? Was it right after the court papers were signed, or did it take some time and did it happen gradually?
yeah, it's I mean, it was gradually. So the thing was is that um, you know blamed it on that I was working out west, but I always made sure every second weekend when I was home, I'd take my youngest home for the week, and then that weekend that I'd be going back to go back out west, I'd end up getting a hotel room for my boys for the 2 nights, and then I'd see my other son, and then I'd end up flying out. So I did that for 7 months, and I just missed them so much. I couldn't do it. So I ended up taking a job at the local lobster plant for minimum wage, just so I was able to see my kids. And at that time, as the years went on, it was 2015, I think, at that time, and I had them pretty much the whole summer, and which was awesome. But after the summer, it started getting to like every second weekend, and then I wasn't allowed to keep them an extra day for the holiday, or I wasn't allowed to do anything, or I'd be threatened that the police would be called, and they were. So I mean, that's the that's the worst of it. It always ends up coming back to the law enforcement agencies jumping in when it's. And I don't want to be biased or sexist or whatever it is, but it's the in my experience, it's they do more for the female than they do for the male, and again, it's the threats. So
Well, statistically speaking, when you look at who has custody in Canada, it is overwhelmingly single mothers
right,
relative to single fathers that have custody.
right,
Um, and police, when they deal with these situations, there is a disparity in the way they handle reports by men related versus reports made by women. There are cases across the country where RCMP investigations have issued an Amber Alert when the child was taken by the father, but have failed to issue Amber Alerts when the child was taken by the mother. Even in a case in Calgary where two girls were missing for, they were 2 weeks before the RCMP started their investigation trying to find these two girls,
right,
and they weren't found until 2 months later in another province. And during that entire time, they never issued an Amber Alert
right,
because they said all the criteria weren't met. And the criteria that wasn't met is they didn't believe the children were in harm
right,
because the mother said she had left them in the care of her sister and her mother. Now, 2 weeks later, still no one has seen the children. No one can find the grandmother or the aunt that is supposed to be looking after the children, and no one can find the children. And they still don't issue an Amber Alert. And it took them 2 months from when the children were supposed to be turned over to the father
right,
before they were finally found in a different province. So
yeah,
you're correct in your observations of how the police handle these, and that's part of the problem. Police are given bad direction on how to handle cases related to family matters.
Hmm.
And that creates an escalation in these cases instead of doing anything to help. And I believe that is what may have happened in your case. Have you had any help in from the police in getting custody or access time to your children?
No.
And have you reported this to any of the policing agencies?
Yes. So there's 3 police agencies that are involved right now.
Okay. And who are
The RCMP, Halifax Police, and Ottawa. So there's a open investigation on 2 police officers right now.
Okay.
And there's several complaints for Halifax. And yeah.
So what were the complaints and against the officers? What did they do to cause you to make complaints?
Ottawa, I mean, we're going to this summer. I didn't see my children for it was 6 months at that time, and I ended up getting legal advice. Discussed it with the Ottawa Police that I was going to drive up to Ottawa and pick up the children when my 6 weeks started in mid-July, and 2 weeks prior, I was making sure that I done a binder, got all the information right, contacted the right people, and ended up contacting one of the support groups. Spoke to Paulette McDonald, it's Paulette McDonald, to see if I get a support person just to advocate. I have a traumatic brain injury, and I'm diagnosed with 2 trauma disorders. So I just wanted to make sure I did it right. So I ended up driving from Cape Breton to Ottawa. I got a hold of my support person and Ottawa police officer. When I got there, we went over to binder, said everything was fine, everything looked great, everything that he needed to see was there, and he said he was going to make sure that my ex-wife followed the custody agreement, and that he was going to ask the children that if they wanted to come with me, that he was making sure that the kids were coming home with me. We got in the vehicles. He told us to stay close. I was behind him in my vehicle, and when we got to the residence, there was a 3-way stop there, and my 2 boys were outside. And when they saw me, I'm going to try not to get emotional, but it's when they saw me, they lit up, and they just started waving. And then the officer made a gesture for me to keep driving, and I didn't understand that, but because I do what I'm told, so I just figured, you know what I mean, just he's going to take care of it, and he's going to get my boys, and that's it. So I ended up waiting there on the side for an hour, and he ended up getting into his vehicle and driving up behind me, and waited a couple minutes, and I wasn't understanding. Then another vehicle ended up blocking me off in front of me, and they got out their vehicle, and I was very intimidated at that time because prior to 2015, I had 2 RCMP officers that assaulted me very bad. So that's one cause of why I have a trauma disorder, and I started having triggers.
What was the cause for the RCMP to assault you in the past there? What led to that?
Um, my brother passed also. My older brother passed in 2015, and my older brother was known to the law, and they just figured that because of my last name that I was the exact same as my brother. So when they ended up showing up at my mother's house for a wellness check, um, they took matters in their own hand, and they just decided that they were going to assault me, and they tased me and led me inside of my mother's house and drugged me out in the middle of St. Peter's, and left me hanging out there for an hour for everybody to see. And they ended up, when they got me to the hospital, they took my blood 4 times, and there was nothing in my system. And within a month, the 2 officers were sent to a new detachment, and a couple months later, the charges were dropped. And at that time, my ex-wife took my kids away from me for 5.5 weeks. That's when the kids started. I started noticing that they had like separation attachments. Um, when I ended up seeing the kids, I know we're getting off the story about Ottawa, but when I ended up seeing the kids after that 5.5 weeks, they were never the same. They would always tell me that, they saw that I was calling and that their mother would not allow them to pick up the phone. And so that was probably the severe of prior to before we separated to separation. That was the big one for the kids to actually start having them not being able to see their father. So, but back to Ottawa,
Yes.
they got, as soon as they got out the car, he told the meter changed, and he just said that my ex-wife showed him the document saying that I wasn't able to see my children. I asked him to show me that document because there isn't one. There's only one court order. He said that he wasn't able to get involved in family court, so his whole story changed from let's go get the kids and have your time with them, and to he wasn't going to get involved. So
Okay, so let me try to get this straight and accurate. So, you had a court order for custody and access of your children. You called the Ottawa Police Department prior to arriving to pick up your children for your custody and access time to make sure that they would not interfere with you picking up your children. You provided them with a court order, and then what happened? They didn't. You didn't get your children. What happened?
no, even though the kids said that they wanted to go with me, that they wanted to come out and even give me a hug, their mother said no, and the officer wouldn't allow it either. So he told me that I better get out of Ottawa that night, because if I ended up sticking around or somehow the children would get in my vehicle, that I would end up being charged with abduction.
So, let me get this straight. You have a court order for your children to be with you, and an Ottawa police officer threatened to arrest you if your children got in the vehicle with you?
Yeah.
So, what did you do how did you deal with that situation?
Not good. Again, it took me probably till the next day to even kind of understand what happened. I got up there within, I think it was 15 hours. I drove up 15 hours, 17 hours that I got there. It took me 45 hours to drive home. I'd end up falling asleep at the wheel, and it was just my trauma activated. So it wasn't good. I got a text from my son probably about an hour after I left, and he said, "Are you going back to Nova Scotia?" And I said, "Yes." And he just put okay. Then I just told him I loved him, and he said, "I love you," and that was it. So
you, so you, like this is. I know it's not too hard to believe, but I think for anyone who hasn't experienced alienation, it's almost incredible that something like this can happen. You go to court, you sign documents, or you go through a lawyer. You didn't even have to go to court, so you save that process. You signed documents, you entered into a contract with this person in good faith, and now the police are threatening to arrest you for trying to see your children in compliance with that court order.
right.
That's obscene. It's I'm so sorry. So has anything happened to the officers for threatening you with arrest?
So the investigation is ongoing. So
Okay. So you did file a complaint against the officers?
Yeah.
What was the complaint for?
I'd have to look up the proper terms. Bill, I know it's 282 of the Criminal Code of Canada, and there's another one that I would have to. You put
Yeah,
down.
the Section 127 of the Criminal Code of Canada states anyone who fails to comply with the court order can be held accountable up to 2 years in jail. Section 282 is 10 years in jail. That's for keeping a child in contravention of a court order. And anyone that helps or aids in keeping, harboring, detaining, interfering with custody and access can also be charged under Section 282. The police officer, I believe, in my opinion, definitely interfered with a court order and interfered with your custody and access time that was court ordered. I believe officers, when they're in situations like this, they should be charged because that's exactly what they do. They interfere with court orders, and they create more problems in these situations because they don't intervene and do what's right.
Right.
Keeping a child in contravention of a court order is a criminal offense under the Criminal Code of Canada. And while they do investigate reports of children being kept from a parent in contravention of a court order, as we discussed earlier, it varies the response, whether it is a male making the report or a female. There's also a case from Alberta of a father who failed to return the child to the mother at 3:30 p.m. on December 24th of 2021. On December 26th, an arrest warrant was issued for the father under Section 282 of the Criminal Code, keeping a child in contravention of a court order, and Section 127 of the Criminal Code, failure to comply with the court order. This happened in a day.
Right.
And any charges under Section 282 of the Criminal Code needs to be approved by the Attorney General of that province. So you made a report to the officer at that time, I believe, under those two sections of the Criminal Code.
Yes.
And his response was, how do you respond to that?
I haven't spoken to the officer since the complaints, but what do you mean? Sorry.
Well, I believe he told you that he'd arrest you if you didn't leave.
Oh yeah.
So you made a criminal complaint to a police officer and he completely disregarded it. Again, that was the same thing for another father in Cochrane, where he was supposed to pick up his children at 6 p.m. and they didn't get returned to him until 2 months later because the RCMP, in that case, failed to investigate, and they didn't start their investigation until weeks after the father reported the children being missing. So I'm sorry that you went through this, but again, this is fairly consistent in the world of parental alienation, and that's what we're trying to highlight here. How how wrong the system is. It's supposed to be there to protect you and your children from abuse or criminal actions. And instead, officers stand by and assist in criminal actions
Yeah.
by helping one party keeping children or a child in contravention of a court order. So um, it's amazing that you drove that distance to see your children, and that's the result you got. You know, that was the whole point of going to court.
Right.
It's I'm so sorry that you went through this, and thank you for coming on and sharing this. It's important that other people know, because I know I felt so alone when I started this process, and your story's not much different than mine. Having a good life, successful, um, children, you had a business, everything was going good, and you went from that to moving back with your mother. I was in the same boat. I had to move back with my parents. So it's not easy. This process destroys people and destroys families.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that you had to go through this. And again, thank you for coming on and sharing this. So what's going on now with your case? Like, have you made it back to court to have a decision made on the children being kept from you?
So I'll back up to very short. In January, prior to my kids going back from Christmas break, my oldest son ended up running away, and he became his mental health wasn't good, and he didn't want to go back because he was disclosing abuse from the stepfather, which has been documented since 2016, and third-party reports that this man puts bruises on my kids and steps on their chest and bangs their heads together and
Who were these reports made to?
children's aid
Children's
protection.
Aid in Nova Scotia?
Yeah,
Okay, and did they ever conduct an investigation?
yeah, yeah. There's if I can remember, 3 investigations. One in 2000, I think 17, 2020, and then what has just happened. Again, they go by what's written in summaries. They don't go through the reports. They stick to a narrative. I believe that is what this whole system is about, and they they don't. The, the system needs to change.
So what was the narrative presented in your case that prevented child protection, children's aid, whatever you would like to call them, from conducting a thorough investigation? Like, there was visible marks on your sons, and did what was did they give you a report? Did they have
Yeah,
anything to say about their investigation?
yeah. So every time that for the major issues of the bruising or the children talking about you know fingernails going into their skin, putting their heads underneath water, and that they're feel like they're going to drown as a form of punishment. Um, it all came off as either play or my oldest son was too sensitive, right? So it's the projection. So or it's we're going into a court case, and these accusations are being said just prior to going to court. It's the whole projection of the manipulator. So they take the focus off of the abuser, and they put it somewhere else, and that's what I've noticed with the system is that they continue to believe. I don't even, they don't believe it. It's how it's set up. So that's what
Um,
it is.
I'm so sorry for everything you've been through and your family. This is horrible. And again, it's not that uncommon. Many other people have shared similar stories with me, and it doesn't get any easier listening to them or hearing them.
Mhm.
So again, thank you for sharing these personal details of your life and trying to share that so others can also come forward and share their stories because we all need to come together. And otherwise, the abuse for all of us will continue
Right.
as long as no one stands up and this pattern of abuse continues, it
Right.
will be allowed to continue.
Right.
And that's why I have been active and I have tried to create awareness about parental alienation and the different personality disorders that drives cases of parental alienation. So again, thank you. It's unbelievable that you didn't get any help. So what currently is the status of your case? Are you going back to court anytime, or what's going on there?
So I'll go back to January because this is where it all reflects to the worst. We had to take my son to the IWK
Okay.
because of his mental health. Excuse me. And while he was getting assessed, the stepfather and ex-wife drove from Ottawa 15 hours, and the stepfather came after me in the parking lot to get physical with me while my 17-month-old daughter and my youngest son was in the passenger seat, and my son was being assessed for his abuse. So while my son was talking about the abuse, the stepfather was outside in the parking lot coming after me while my kids were next to me. So um, the Halifax police showed up, and I called them prior to me knowing that they were on their way to the hospital because just from the abuse of the stepfather over the years, he, I, I knew what was going to happen, or I could expect what was going to happen, and the Halifax police that night done an amazing job. They ended up coming at the very right time before he smashed my window. But anyways, they 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 got a hold of him. The ILWK, the COVID protocols, got us into the hospital. Um, they took care of us. They made the stepfather and ex-wife leave the premises. They weren't allowed back on the premises. When my oldest son heard what happened, he went into another crisis. And instead of admitting him, they thought it'd be better for him to come home with us, just so he wouldn't be alone. Because again, it went back to the code policy. So they ended up getting us to park our vehicle in the ambulance bay, and we loaded the family, and we ended up getting escorted out of the city by the Halifax police. And the RCMP was called to make stops for us on the way down, just for our safety. So we ended up going back to court. Another incident happened prior to the court date. I won't get into that. So we ended up having a court date on January 11th, and we put in evidence, and we ended up getting ganged up by the system itself, and We were talked down to, that we were bad parents, me and my partner, and that everything was my fault. And they did not even allow us to speak. We said that if anything happened, if my oldest ends up going back, that it was on the court and on my ex-wife. And we had to, we weren't even allowed to say goodbye to our son. So they sent him back. And not even a month later, he sends us 2 videos of the stepfather smashing things and screaming at his mother. We contacted the courts and child protection and Ottawa police and told them to get the kids out of there, man. And 44 days later, the Ottawa Children's Aid shows up to do an interview. The courts would not give us a court date. And nobody would answer our emails or calls until it was, I think, a day after that we filed because the kids weren't coming home for our March break. And then we ended up getting a falsified memorandum from the judge. We had our transcript and we sent it back and we said, everything in this memorandum is false. We're going to put a complaint against the judge, and he's no longer allowed to represent this case because it's false. And then I ended up getting an email from the judge threatening me if I didn't agree to a conference, that I wouldn't see my kids again.
Okay, so do you have that email? Could you please send that to me? And that, that's a private communication from a judge to you. I don't think that is appropriate or ethical, or it doesn't sound right to me. And I'd love to see that. And I'd also like to share that with everyone else, if you don't mind, because that's not a court document. That is a personal message from a judge presiding over your case that sounds very threatening. Mm-hmm. Is the judge still presiding over your case?
They won't. He was removed.
Okay. So that judge was removed from the case.
Yeah, but he's the head judge. He's the associate chief justice. So the thing is that he picks and chooses the judges on who resides on our case. So then the new judge, his behavior was the exact same. We called them out on it, and they tried to get us into a trial and then a pre-trial, and then again, it was in June prior to my summer vacation. So we called out the other judge, and they wanted me to go to court without a lawyer. What happened in January? Prior to that, most of the time we were self-represented. I can't go back into court by my trauma. They messed me up. So
I understand. One of my last visits to court, I had a panic attack and I was attended to by 3 paramedics. So I know how traumatizing a place it is to go, and it can be. In 2020, I was thrown out of the courthouse by 4 sheriff's officers that I streamed live to Facebook. Nice. And I made a criminal complaint to the police of assault for 2 of the officers that grabbed me. I don't believe they made a report. Currently, I've made a request under the Right to Information Protection Privacy Act to get the reports from the St. John Police Department. St. John Police Department has failed to provide me with those reports. I've made complaints to the Ombudsman, and I received an email in February of 2022 stating the investigation of my complaint would be concluded within 90 business days of my complaint being made. So the investigation would be completed by March 3rd. Just in July, I finally received an email saying that they were going to provide the police more time prior to conducting an investigation. Well, they already said an investigation was going to take place. Here's the letter. Now, 90 days later, you send me another email saying this has been put on hold until the Ombud makes a decision on what to do with this case. So I still haven't been provided any files from the St. John Police Department under the Right to Information Protection and Privacy Act, which they're required to provide me within 30 days. So it's going on almost a year now, and I still haven't been provided those files. The Ombud, I've made a complaint after the 30 days had expired, and I was not provided the files. So the complaint with the Ombud is almost as old as the request for the files from the St. John Police Department. And again, nothing has happened and nothing's going on, and they're still trying to delay, which is what each agency does. And they try to wait you out and provide you with case conferences, which will take all your money and deplete you of funds prior to having a trial. I'm over 7 years into my case, and there has still been no trial. Yet I've spent over $100,000 in legal fees, and I've had numerous judgments made against me. I have had my children taken from me. I've not been afforded any presumption of innocence. I've been alleged to have done many things, and during that 7-year period, neither the police, the RCMP, Child Protection, or any other agency or person has been able to provide any evidence to corroborate the allegations that were made against me. The RCMP had conducted an criminal investigation into all the allegations against me, but the Crown declined to prosecute. Now, the Crown prosecutor at the time, he was a friend of the prosecutor who tried to put me in jail on false allegations that I had a criminal trial for. So that Crown prosecutor is now a provincial court judge in St. John, and I had to file a lawsuit against the province of New Brunswick for malicious prosecution to try and bring the evidence forward against the Crown prosecutor and the St. John Police Department. I even made a criminal complaint of criminal conspiracy against Kelly Winchester, who was the Crown prosecutor, is now a provincial court judge, and Detective Leslie Drost of the St. John Police Department. This investigation was summarily brushed aside by the police chief with the approval of the New Brunswick Police Commission. The New Brunswick Police Commission is an agency that represents the people of the province of New Brunswick to protect them from abuse by municipal police forces in the province of New Brunswick. So instead of them investigating my criminal complaint and the evidence I had, they agreed with the St. John Police Chief, I think it was Mr. Bates at the time, John Bates, and they summarily dismissed the complaint without investigating. So I can see how other people can go through the same thing, and this is where people who haven't been through alienation have difficulty understanding why these cases don't get resolved.
Right. And the fact is that, excuse me, the judge has a track record of putting kids back into the hands of the abusers. So the last time that he was in the media was 2018. So it just, it's sad. Sad that the kids have to go through it. So
it is. I'm so sorry, and again, thank you for coming on and sharing this. I have shared some of my story before, and I hope to share more of it. But it's I'm still going through mine. I don't want to give away all the information I have, and I want other people like you to come forward and share your experiences, because I've been trying to follow the process of how they managed to keep these cases out of court, and how they managed to create a narrative against one party, despite there being no evidence of the narrative that was created.
Right.
So I hope to, on some of these broadcasts, I hope to share what I've learned about this process and how they managed to maintain a narrative for such a long period of time against one party, and use that to deny them custody or access of their children. Just denying children access to a loving parent is abusive, and it's wrong.
It is sad.
So when was the last time you saw your children?
Really, but for that minute in Ottawa, and January. So it's
January
of this year.
January of this year. So wow. So you got to see them a minute in Ottawa when you were supposed to pick them up for your custody and access time, and that was it between January and now.
Yeah. So there's no communication. They have a little sister they're not allowed to talk to. So they were in Cape Breton last weekend or week before. Asked to an email to see if I could, go to the playground for an hour just so that they could see us and spend time with their sister, and there's nothing. So the boys don't even text now. So it's that's how far it's gone, and it's the abuse. So it's sad because it's them that live there. That's the sad thing. So
I'm so sorry. We've been on for over 50 minutes now. Again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come on tonight and share your story.
I appreciate it.
As for your story, that I know I've mentioned many cases in Canada where women have been treated differently by police than men in reporting cases of alienation. But alienation statistically happens to men and women equally. Now, how the police respond, how the courts respond, and how society looks at alienation is very differently depending on whether you're a man or a woman. What people need to recognize is this is a form of family violence and abuse, and it's abuse of the children perpetrated by one parent, maliciously done to exert control over the other party by using the children as tools, as weapons. And it's damaging to everyone involved. It's financially destructive to all parties once it gets to court, because the court fails to recognize the situation. They most often make the wrong decisions because they can't tell the difference between the two parties, which one is the abuser and which one is the victim.
Yeah.
And most times they see someone who was upset, traumatized, doesn't present well, because they are suffering from trauma. And those are the indicators of a person suffering from trauma. But because the judges or lawyers don't recognize that, they see this as not normal behavior. And therefore, they must be the cause of the problem, which is, again, where the police, the lawyers, courts, judges, child protection, a lot of these agencies, according to Dr. Stephen Miller, make wrong decisions 95% of the time. That is a huge amount of children being left in abusive situations to go on for years. How long has this situation gone on for you?
11 years.
11 years. Wow. So You went from being married, having full access to your children, getting divorced, having equal parenting time with your children, to this year, you have seen your children, your two boys, for a total of a couple of minutes outside their home in Ottawa. That's wrong. You've been removed from your children's lives. That is not only traumatic to you, it is traumatic to the children.
Okay.
I'm so sorry you're having these difficulties, but I've experienced the same. I know what you're going through, and I'll continue to try and help you
I know. I appreciate
through
it.
your process and trying to get this recognized and get help so you get to see your children again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to sign off for tonight. Again, Adam, thank you for taking the time and being on here and sharing your story. I know it's never easy, and it opens up a lot of old wounds and memories. So thank you for taking the time to come and share this, and hopefully your story will be able to help other people through what their situation or what they're going through.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. 100%.
No problem. You have a good night. Take care, buddy.
You too, bud.